Welcome to Amy. For those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Amy before, she was um, once upon a time a family advisor at Sick Kids before she and her family moved out west to beautiful British Columbia. And Amy is joining us today to share her experience of going through the process of writing a wonderful book for children and really for parents too, um, about childhood cancer. So, Amy, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm going to start off with just a bit of background about myself. So, as Karen mentioned, I wrote a book called Robot Music, a story for kids with Lee-Fraumeni syndrome and other cancer predispositions. And I wrote it in collaboration with my daughter Ruby. So, a bit of background about me. I live in Kelowna, moved here 5 years ago. I have Lee-Fraumeni syndrome, which is a genetic cancer predisposition. And how LFS works is it's a rare, highly penetrant autosomal dominant disorder caused by TP53 tumor suppressor gene mutations. It gives females an almost 100% chance, lifetime risk of cancer, and it's a significantly higher risk for kids to get cancer with this syndrome. And also, many people develop multiple primary cancers. So for me, I didn't know I had it until I was 36 and had my third cancer diagnosis. So at 29, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Then I had a basal cell carcinoma. And then at the age of 36, I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. And that was about 12 years ago now. And at that time, they decided to test me. It was through a research study because it was really expensive then to test for these things. And they found that I had the TP53 mutation, or Lee-Fraumeni syndrome. And I had two kids at the time, so they were 5 months old and 2 years old, and they were both tested. And it was found that my older daughter also had the TP53 mutation. So needless to say, I was fairly overwhelmed. And we started my daughter on the surveillance protocol, which Dr. Malkin had developed in collaboration with some other doctors. And that required her to go and get blood work every 3 months, as well as ultrasounds, MRIs every 6 months of her brain, and full body MRIs every year. So, of course, that was tricky with a little person having to sit in an MRI machine and do all these things. And as she got older, she had more and more questions. So by the time she was 6 or 7 is when I started writing the book. And going back to my own journey, by that time, I had also had an early stage lung cancer diagnosis, adenocarcinoma. So I was realizing like what the significance of having this mutation meant. So I decided to write the book because there was nothing out there, essentially. And I wanted to help explain this to my daughter. I don't consider myself an expert, but I have done it. I did a lot of winging it as I went. So I'm kind of presenting a better order of doing things than what I did because I did a lot of winging it. But my priority at the time was just to get it out in the world, get something out there, knowing that it was probably not going to be perfect, but imperfect was better than nothing. So I tried to approach it with humility and a sense of just vulnerability, that I would be sharing my story and that of my daughter to a certain extent. And ultimately, any feelings of doubt or vulnerability were helped by the fact that I felt like it wasn't really about me. It was about the community and these kids that were dealing with this diagnosis. So one of the first steps is, what is the target audience? Of course, for me, it was easy because I was targeting my daughter's age group, which was around 6 years old. So the book I wrote, Robot Music, is I think anywhere from the age of 2 or 3 up to, depending on the child, 8 or 9 years old, I would say. So that will influence what the book looks like, of course, and how many facts you want to convey versus how much story. Um, so I decided to write a fiction book that would contain broad stroke facts. And I have to say that the book I first imagined that was going to be whimsical and magical didn't really end up being the book I created because I was a little bit constrained by the facts that I wanted to convey. So there's always that balance. And the things I wanted to convey were the difference between having cancer and being predisposed to cancer, a high level explanation of what the TP53 gene does, the idea of genes. Um, how do you get Lee-Fraumeni syndrome? Where did it come from? Is it 100% sure I will get cancer? The concept of a genetic counselor, inheritance, so passing things down from parents versus a de novo mutation. So I'm the first one in my family that has it. And because someone has cancer, that doesn't mean they also have LFS. All the different, I wanted to represent all the different surveillance modalities that I mentioned. So ultrasound, MRI, blood draws. And in a sense, so there were these facts I wanted to convey, but also I just wanted to have a book where a kid could read it and see themselves as a character and feel like that was normalized. Someone say, oh, I go to the hospital, I do that too. So the facts were kind of secondary, I think, at this level with the young target audience. So before starting to write, I think it's a good idea to consult. So that has two purposes. One is to make sure you're not reinventing the wheel and you can collaborate on existing projects if they're out there or springboard off of them. And that the other dual purpose is it spreads the word. So whoever you're talking to about it now knows that you're writing a book and may be more invested in helping you get it out to the community. So a big way that I connected with people was at the LFS symposium. So there are a lot of scientists there, genetic counselors, psychosocial professionals, patient advocacy groups, as well as members of the LFS community, as well as researchers presenting their research. So researchers, medical staff, and oncologists. And that was a great place to kind of figure out. I mean, it wasn't the reason I went there, but it was a nice bonus. So I met with a lot of these people, and there was a psychologist at Dana-Farber who shared a publication that they had written, which I've reproduced there. It's called FAP and Me. And that was just helpful to see what someone else had done. It is not fiction, so it's a really fact-based booklet. It's really well done and just something with illustrations, and that is not as for as young an audience. I don't think it's for a little bit older, but it was a really nice place to start and say, okay, this is what they created. And then I also spoke with a genetic counselor who was really helpful at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And it turned out that it was on their agenda to develop a publication for LFS. So they were super helpful and ended up providing the whole glossary for me. And I think you find your champions sort of in this process, and you find people that are really engaged, or hopefully you do. So illustrations is a good next place to go before you're actually writing. So there are different ways you can go about it. You can purchase a publisher package, which is what I did. If you're not using a publisher package, if you have somebody you know who illustrates, if it's yourself, that's obviously communication is going to be clear. But if it's somebody that is doing it for free or maybe just helping out, I would just recommend clear communication. So maybe establishing the parameters of the relationship, providing them with a scene that might be in the book and asking them to give you an illustration, just to make sure you're on the same page and that your communication style works. Have a conversation about timelines. If you have a timeline in mind, is that going to work with their life and what they're envisioning? Because I actually had a false start with a really kind, generous person who was going to do free illustrations. And I had never seen his artwork, which was beautiful, but wasn't as whimsical and child-oriented as I had envisioned. So it was a tricky thing to backstep from. So what I've got on the left here on the slide are this is exactly what you'll see on the if you do the self-publisher method. This is from the Tell Well Publishing website, and they have all kinds of examples of illustrations and different styles that different illustrators have. So they have the basic style, some of which are shown here, but there are many, many more. And then for a higher cost, there is a complex style, so the more intricate illustrations. I bought a package from Tell Well. I had 16 illustrations. They were $125 each, and that was back in 2020, so it may have gone up. And so it was $2,000 for illustrations. I would recommend trying to keep words out of the illustrations. I had a few that had wording. MRI was in one of them. Waiting room was in one of them. And it just makes things trickier if you are doing translations down the road. Makes it more costly, not trickier, just more money to amend the illustrations. So another step is to get a quote. Of course, if you are looking, well, you're going to have to, if you are self-publishing, you're going to have to pay for it somehow. I did write a bunch of letters to publishers, more alternative publishers, but I didn't have any luck with that. So I did decide to go to the self-publishing route. I met a woman who had published her own little book, and it was really well done, and she was happy with the process. So I started with a quote from Tell Well, and I got a quote from another self-publisher. Sorry, my dogs are barking. I don't know if you can hear them. You can. But I like Tell Well because they were Canadian, and their quote was decent. So I ended up going with them. It ended up costing $8,000 total. So illustrations, and I ended up probably amending a few more times than I had to, which does add to the cost. So in your package you order, you get, I think it's 2 rounds of revisions, but if you go above that, it costs more. If funding is flexible, you could write the manuscript first and be less constrained by the cost, but if you get the quote first, then you can make sure that you're within the parameters. So you'll need to know the length of the manuscript to get a quote, the number of illustrations, and what type of books you want to be available. So do you want hardcover available, paperback, and ebook? If you don't want hardcover, that reduces the price. And of course, if you have a longer book, it's going to be pricier. So it depends how much information you want to convey. So next, writing the manuscript. One of the things I did first was just try to read a lot, which I'm sure you guys are already doing because you are a book club. So, sorry, is it really loud, the barking, or is it? No, okay. It's loud where I am.
Not at all, Amy. Yeah.
Okay, good. So writing, there's reading what's out there. I didn't, as I said, there was nothing in the LFS world, but there were some things about parents who had cancer. I couldn't find a lot, to be honest with you. It was more sort of like things that would be emailed to me as PDFs, but not a lot just from searching for books. I spoke with a friend's mom who was a children's author to try to get her idea on just the idea of a children's book and what she did when she wrote a book. And she planted the ideas of having something that's an adventure, a sense of kids breaking the rules a little bit, something that would keep them engaged, not just you giving them facts and they'll just be bored. It's like, why am I reading this? Obviously you need to keep an idea about word count and how many illustrations you're going to want. Gender representation is something to consider. Do you want a girl and a boy, just to broaden the marketability and the relatability? You want to avoid culturally specific references. I had mentioned a freezy, and somebody who read it in the US said, "What's a freezy?" So I changed it to popsicle, just little things like that. And then editing thoroughly to avoid extra charges because, as I said, it does cost more when you have to add additional revision rounds. Okay, so you can pitch to funders while you're writing, do them simultaneously. So I connected with the community and reached out to the Lee-Fraumeni Syndrome Association. Oh, sorry, I'm behind on my slides here. Wait, where am I? Pitch to funder. I think I've gone too far ahead.
I think you were right on. Yeah. One after that,
There
Amy.
we go. Okay.
There you go.
um, so I emailed the LFSA for a funding request. I had met both the individuals I connected with prior at the LFS symposium. And I mentioned that I would offer to give royalties to the LFSA. I described a broad idea of the book and the need in the community, which they were well aware of. And it was all fairly informal, and they were great. They put a lot of trust in me and agreed to fund the book. And I kept them updated throughout the process. Update on, what samples of the illustrations, what they would look like. And then after the book was published, and I still do it, I send them updates on sales and send them royalties when they come in and just keep them in the loop on the process. I did have to request more money when my illustrator fell through, which I felt really badly about. And so that was awkward, but they agreed to fund it and they were very understanding. One thing I would recommend doing, which we did with two of the translations, was in our initial pitch, we also included funding for a run of books, like a print run of 50 or 100 books, because you have the funder's ear at that point, and it's just a good idea. You can get the stockpile of books that you can then get out into the community. So once the manuscript's written, you're done your story, I would recommend sharing it again because you never know what feedback you're going to get. So I consulted with families that had kids who are affiliated with patient advocacy groups. And they were great. They came back to me, like I mentioned, the Freezy comment. One of the oncologists suggested, I only had a girl in the story. She mentioned that it may be a good idea to include a boy. And I would recommend that, it's up to you, but if you are sharing the manuscript and you don't want it to be distributed in the form of, a stapled booklet, just make that clear to the person you're sharing it with. Obviously, they're going to maybe want to print it out and read it, but if you want to keep the integrity of a book, and just ask them not to share the file and not to distribute it. Then I updated everybody when the book was available. So again, that buy-in and just respect for their time that they contributed and read it for you. So then you're at the point where everything is done and you are going to go to the self-publisher. There are a number of little small steps that you have to do. A lot of decision making and just sort of ping pong back and forth with the publisher. You'll be the quarterback for the whole process. You're really running it. There can be a significant amount, not significant, but more of a turnaround time on their end is what I found. And so I just tried to get my action items done as quickly as possible, because they're usually not a lot of work. It's just a decision and then you send it back, and just to reduce the timeline to get your project done faster. One complaint I have is that my changes were not always done properly. So I really had to be detail oriented and look at what they sent back, and they wouldn't charge me an additional revision round if I pointed out. But there was a lot of documenting. Remember, I said to do this and this wasn't done. So that was a little bit frustrating, but one of those things I just sort of put up with. So the first thing that will be done is the illustrations. So that's the first step. Once they're done, then they do the book design. So where the words will be in comparison to the illustrations, what the font will be like, the size, the colors, all of that. And everything's done via a portal. And they have YouTube videos with every step. So it's really very user-friendly, I found. And if something's not working over email with your project manager, you can set up a 10-minute phone call. They have a really easy calendar system. So you can do that. Yeah, there are a lot of different details of the steps. I don't think I'll go into too much more detail. There's an annual fee to think about and a degree of ongoing administration. So I guess you need to think about it as the author, you want that to be you. So there's an $85 annual fee. And then they're just processing the royalty checks and forwarding them if royalties are going somewhere. So just something to think about. And when distribution happens, it is all done through the publisher as well. So um, for Tell Wall, they'll distribute to Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble, and many, many more. Those are the big ones, though. And so it's really easy. As soon as publication is done, they set it up for distribution. They send you an email and say it's available. And people can go buy it now, and then you can let people know. Um, and the next thing I want to talk about is translation. So, robot music was translated into German, Japanese, French, and Spanish. I was always the um, middle person between somebody who reached out from that community and said, "Hey, we'd love to have this book available in this language. How do we go about it?" And then I we went through Tellwell still for all of the translations, and I was the middle person, and it costs about $1,500. So the person who reached out in all cases has found the funding and then been my point person for just relaying any of the questions. And, if they have a logo that they want to include from the funder, we can swap that out and put their logo in. I actually got an email, was it this week? Last week from somebody in Israel that said, I found your blog. It's like our family really enjoyed it. I want to translate it into Hebrew. So it's just interesting how these people find you. And then my in-laws got a call 2 days ago from a man in England who owns a bookstore who wanted to buy 25 copies and is having an event. But he couldn't find me, but he found my in-laws in Georgetown, Ontario, and then they gave him my number, but I haven't spoken with him yet. So it'll be exciting to hear what kind of event he's doing. So I've sold close to 600 books so far. It's not a whole lot in royalties. It's $2,750, and that isn't really the main point, right? The main point is to have the book out there, and it's sort of a bonus. When somebody reaches out about a translation, I have sort of an email that I can go back to and just send to them. And a good starting point is just a Word document that I have that has all of the illustrations in it, and then they can just translate the text and put it under each illustration. And that just gives them a tangible first step, because it can be like, how do I go about this here? Like, just translate and put it in this document. So we have never had to pay for a translator. That it would be an additional cost if that was the case. And finally, what would I do differently? I would have used the publisher's illustration package at the outset. That's just my own circumstance. I can't draw anything, so that wouldn't have been good. And then, of course, clear communication if you do have somebody who's illustrating for you. I considered, would I have done a shorter story to cut down on costs? That's a tricky one, because it is hard to tell a story and include all the facts you want to include. And if you get it too small, then it's only facts, unless you cut out some of the facts. So just trying to get that balance right. Because I really didn't think about money before I started writing the manuscript. So it's a good idea to do that. And then I mentioned including the printing order in the funding request, just to improve, just to get the book out there more, because if somebody has a stockpile at the hospital. I know Sick Kids bought a bunch of robot music and they were giving them to patients. And I probably could have done a better job with marketing and reaching out to different hospitals and their genetic counseling departments to push the larger purchases. That's it. So yeah, I know there aren't a whole lot of us, but I'm happy to have a conversation about anything you guys want to talk about.
Thank you so much, Amy. I found out things that I didn't know before, just about your process. And um, there will be questions, I know, from everyone who wasn't actually able to make this time, but who will be watching the recording. So if you are watching this recording, um, you can send your questions to directly to Amy.
Sorry, I took my email down there.
You did, yeah,
Yeah.
it was on there. Or to me. And how about you, Trisha? Okay, and to Trisha and her colleague. Oh, good, Kirsty. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to say that was really interesting. I definitely learned a lot about the publishing process that I didn't know about. It's yeah, it's hard to find these things online unless you've done it before. I was wondering with I think you said they were called Tellwell, the publishers. Did you have meetings with them as well? And they included that within your I guess the cost that you were paying to the publisher.
The meetings, I could request a meeting,
Okay.
which would just be a phone call. I think they had them in 10-minute increments. So most of the conversation, I will say the quote process was a lot of phone conversations. Um, so those wouldn't be limited. But then once you have a project manager, if you're using them, I think they try to limit the amount that you are accessing their resources just to run their business. But yeah, you
Yeah.
can, there's no limit on the amount of times you could schedule a phone call. I didn't find that to be a problem.
Okay. And did you for the illustrations, do you get to like choose who's illustrating
Yeah,
your
yeah, you
book?
pick,
Okay.
yeah, you for them, you go on the website and you just scroll through all these different illustrators and they have 4 samples
Okay.
from each illustrator and you just choose who you like. It was really
Okay.
hands off in the sense that you just describe the scene and get the illustration emailed to you. And then yeah, like I said, you can amend a couple times. So it might not be exactly what you were envisioning, but the style is really consistent with what
Okay.
they presented on the website.
Cool. Yeah. It's interesting. It's nice that they have actual people illustrating and not
For sure.
AI
Yeah.
drawing well, AI is not drawing, but um
Yeah. And I put the illustrator was like, credited in the book. And
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Amy. To start, Tellwell is Tellwell, so I can provide it as a
I see it
resource
now.
after.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's great.
amazing. So I guess my big question is, if someone has already gone about doing something and like writing some sort of book and they've missed some of what I would consider the key steps, like consulting the community. How might you suggest they actually go back and do that critical step before they get too far?
And it's published already, or it's,
No, that they've written it, but they haven't published.
you can always consult at this point. I mean, my guess would be any changes or suggestions would just be tweaking. It's not like you would have to start all over again. I think it's really important though, because you don't know what you don't know. There are little things. There's little things that it was like, oh, right, why didn't I think of that? Because everyone brings their own life experience to the book and you only bring your own as well. So like I completely missed the fact, oh, there's no boy in this book. Like that, a simple thing and simple enough to change. So I do think it's important. I mean, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be daunting. It could be a few people, even, just an email to a few people. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. Did you did you consult with or look at different self-publishers? So in addition to Tellwell, were there others that you spoke to?
I spoke to one other one. I definitely could have done a more exhaustive comparison. I think I was just relying on this other person who had done more research, but that was 5 years ago. So there could definitely be better options out there. Um, I think it's just this balance. Like I just wanted to get it done too. There was that level of like, how much do you spend on each step versus just keeping momentum and getting something out there? Because I think it can be paralyzing sometimes to think, try to get it perfect, versus doing the best you can. But yeah, no, I was not exhaustive in my search. I think part of the reason I ruled out the other publisher I was looking at, it's a while ago now, was just the communication wasn't as good at the outset. I just found Tellwell to be pretty user friendly, and they were responsive. They're in Victoria. Like it's just, yeah, it felt like a natural fit. But I mean, who knows with AI and all, right? Like there's probably a lot less expensive options now, I would think. And depending on, how you feel about having a person versus going the AI route.
How long did it take from conception to like the big finish, knowing that you're still always kind of working on translations?
Um, Conception was a couple years before I even started writing. Like I just thought about it and then didn't get to it. But like from like, okay, no, I'm actually doing this, I think about a year, I want to say. I was looking back on emails trying to refresh my memory of all the timelines. But yeah, I think it was about a year. But and that was not full time working on it. Like it could be a lot faster than that. Yeah.
And
If you
how,
didn't have a
oh,
life
sorry,
of
Karen.
daughters. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah.
How was your daughter like integrated into the process? You mentioned that she wrote it with you or was involved in it. How did you involve her?
Um, well, a lot of it was just conversations we had, leading up to hospital visits, or, I mean, at the same time, I was going through cancer. So she's seeing me go through chemo and like having cancer. So it was really, and also when she went to the hospital, she went to the cancer clinic at the hospital. So like the big thing I was trying to explain to her is the difference between having cancer, her seeing it with me and it being like kind of a scary thing, and a predisposition. How do you explain that to a 6-year-old? So it was more just like me working through life and explaining things to her. And then I would actually like write stuff and she would read it. And she's a pretty bright little kid. So she'd be like, well, I don't think that you would do this. Or, just like you would read anything. They read a lot of books, like they get read to all the time. They are great consumers of children's books. So when they read one, they can point out what doesn't feel right to them, even though they maybe couldn't write it themselves. They're great little critics. So yeah, just that. And just it was helpful that I was writing for her. She was my target audience. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. So she was actually reading the text, but also just the conceptualizing what facts I wanted to convey based on where her head was at and trying to figure all this out.
How does Ruby feel about it now that she's much older?
Yeah, it's cool. Like she likes it because I struggled with that. I was like, oh, she's gonna be on the internet, like people. But she is really happy with it. I fill her in on stuff that's translations that are happening, show her the emails, and she did a presentation at school about LFS. And she's in grade 9 now. I think that was last year, and she had a friend who was really on board with the whole LFS idea and, was telling everybody the school what LFS was for her. So, and I know that's not every kid. Like that happens to be her personality. But maybe it helps, having this introduction early. And I mean, it's her life anyway. It's not, like it's not like shocking to her to see it or read it. And she's never said, I wish that you didn't put my name on there. And so, yeah, it's worked out okay. It's worked out well.
Well, I would think it would be something that she could really be proud of. Um, and maybe another a sequel to it one day.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned want to give ample opportunity, Kirsty, if you have questions, just put your hand up. When you were pitching to funders, um, what what did you include for them? Um, were you staying right within the LFS community all the time, or did you branch out to other possible funding groups?
Once I was outside the world of publishers, and I tried to look through my emails to find in my documents, but I couldn't find the letters I wrote. But I was looking at sort of alternative Canadian publishers that looked at minority populations, and that were trying to bring less told stories to the world. But once I moved outside of that realm and I moved to more funding rather than publishing, it was the first place I went was the LFSA. They're the big patient advocacy group, and so I got lucky and I didn't really have to go anywhere else. So I'm not super helpful on that.
Oh no, any answer is helpful, Amy.
Yeah.
Was it an easy sell on that note, though? Like, do many of these patient advocacy groups actually want to support this type of knowledge translation product, like in your experience, or
I think
did
so. Honestly, I almost felt like a lot of people had been talking about doing this and it was almost a relief, like, oh, somebody's going to do this for, almost for us. And I think it helped that they knew who I was somewhat, that's where I think that like the meeting people part of it comes in, because if you're just getting an email, you might not have as much trust. But yeah, I got a sense that they knew the need was there. And like it wasn't like they gave me carte blanche to go do whatever. They definitely wanted check-in, and I was happy to give it. And we had Zoom calls and talked through the process. So yeah, I found there was a real willingness there. If there's a gap in the community, I don't see why there wouldn't be. I mean, someone's willing to do the work, and not, I mean, I didn't get paid for any of the work I did, really just paid the bills. So, but there was a lot of trust. They didn't know what I was going to create, right? It could have been anything. So yeah.
When we were chatting prior to this webinar, um, you mentioned, or we were talking about rejection and where you encountered it, and then how did you handle it?
Yeah, I think it's vulnerability, right? Just feeling like you're putting something so personal out there and that's where I've really tried to make it not about me. It's like, this is for the community. So if I've done it wrong, like, great, let me know. Tell me what I should do differently. It's really a mindset, I think, to try to get in the right frame of mind that you're creating a starting point. I don't know. I didn't I mean, I guess there was rejection from publishers, but I kind of expected that. I haven't really had rejection in that sense, more just vulnerability and sharing with people. And also when the book is available on Amazon, and people can write reviews on there, which is really scary. So every time I check, I update that. I'm like, oh, and that's gone well, thankfully. But who knows? Maybe somebody reads it and says, like, oh, the one thing that does stick in my mind is I use the image of a ladybug being in one of the characters, like cancer being like a ladybug, and before it moves, you want to catch it early, because the big thing about the surveillance is catching cancer early. Um, and then somebody said to me, "Well, is that a good idea? Like, it's going to create a phobia of bugs, or like some psychological impact that I hadn't considered." So that was, but again, I think that is chalked up to, okay, well, maybe that's not the perfect analogy, but oh well, I don't think I'm scarring anyone for life by using a ladybug analogy, So I don't know. It's a little bit of trial and error. And I'm assuming there are parents there with their kids. So if there's an aspect that doesn't work perfectly for them, they can put it in their own phrasing, or add nuance, or something. So the idea is it's a starting point for people. Yeah, and there wasn't, I think it's just a frame of mind that if somebody doesn't like it, that's okay. Or if funders don't see the need, you move on to the next.
Yeah. Uh, Something you just said, I think is a really good point. Parents sitting there with their kids. Is there anything in the forward that mentions, the suggestion that parents actually sit down?
No, there isn't. I don't think. I have it here. But that's a good point. Um, where is it? So when you're publishing, you have to write a little blurb about the book that goes underneath on Amazon or wherever the book's for sale. And the last sentence says, reading this book with young children creates a safe space for questions and conversation. So I think, yeah, that probably gets at that idea.
So you're not directing them to sit down and read this with your child, but that's actually what that says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe they pick it up and have a favorite. I was telling you, we laughed at the one illustration that was done wrong, and the boy has a pointy sock instead of like a rounded sock. And it happens to be, I think it's like in an MRI machine. So it's not all about just getting the facts out, and it's just something that is making Leigh-Fraumeni syndrome, in this case, part of the greater world, and part of something you don't just talk about when you're at the hospital or stressed. It's like adding a little bit of lightness to something that's super heavy.
I think it's incredible that you did this, and even more incredible that you did this while you were actually going through cancer treatment. Um, that shows the complete um, selflessness. Um, the motivation was really to help people, to help other families, to help the children um, with LFS and other cancer predispositions. So yeah, I hope you hear thank you a lot. But I bet there's a whole lot of people out there that wish they could just say thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I do hear it, and it means so much. That's why this email from Israel was so touching, because that's why you create these things, is so that somebody who's struggling finds it, and it helps them. And I think the reason I did get it done is because I was living it, and because it wasn't about me, it was just about getting it out there. Yeah.
I was since you mentioned that, I was going to ask if that maybe was a reason behind not doing a lot of digging for other self-publishers. That time was really critical for you.
yeah, I think I was leaning on people. You know, I leaned on the other woman who did it, and I went to her house and we had a bite to eat together and a drink. And you trust people and you rely on them just like the funders trusted me. You know, there's a lot of that in the process, a lot of humanity, and yeah, and time was of the well, it felt like it was of the essence, and just getting it out, and also my time. So I think that's probably a big part of it. And if something felt right, don't question it too much, you know. Yeah.
Are you saying not to overthink things?
Yeah.
A lot of
Ironic.
us are prone to do, perhaps.
Yeah.
Is there anything to those who haven't started a children's book about childhood cancer, um, who maybe it's just something that they know they want to do and they don't, and I know you've walked us through the process logically. Um, what might you say to somebody who just needs that little bit of push, that encouragement?
I think it is really gratifying to create something that will help kids with cancer, will help this population. I just really think, don't worry, don't focus on what you might get wrong. Just focus on doing your best. And that's where the consultation comes in, is that if you've done your best and there's something missing, somebody else will see it. You know, it's okay. And you're not going to damage anybody if it's not perfect, you know, as long as you're consulting the right people. And I would recommend including somebody from the psychosocial community, a psychologist or a psychiatrist or somebody. Um, and that it's worth it for the, like, you know, 5 families that find that book. A book like that can be really life changing for people. It really can. I mean, books, like for my kids, books were a really big deal for them. You know, that's integral to how they learn about the world, how they place themselves in the world. So I really just think, make yourself part of the community so it's not just about you, and don't worry about making mistakes too much. Do your best and talk to other people, share, and yeah, and think about, you know, maybe it's not going to have the widest reach, but it will have a profound impact.
I think that's really great advice. I really like what you said earlier about looking at the notes that I wrote. I'll find it. Imperfect is better than nothing.
Mhm.
I think we can all, as humans, we can be really critical and want to put out the perfect product. Um,
Especially
I
as
think,
book writers, right? Like, who's the kind of person that sits down and writes a book? Is probably maybe a bit of a perfectionist, and it's not, it's different than conversations where you're going to make mistakes, you need to go back and forth, but you're creating this concrete sort of permanent thing. So yeah, I'm sure that, I know for me too, that's the inclination, is to just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking.
mhm. Edit, edit, edit.
Yeah. Like
I
on the cover, I hate this green pillow.
yeah,
If
we
it's the
I
wrong shade, they got the wrong shade of pillow, and it's like, am I going to spend another $100 to change the color of the pillow? No, but every time I see it, it drives me crazy.
oh
But
no. Now do you wish you had spent that $100 to change?
no, yeah, it wasn't my money. Like I could, well, it started to be my money, but yeah, yeah,
What color is it supposed to be?
bluish. The other ones are blue. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Kirsty, yes, please go ahead.
Um, Yeah, I don't really have a question as such, but just listening to what you're discussing, I think I can definitely relate to that feeling of uh needing a push to actually act on what you're thinking. And I think, yeah, it's very um inspiring what you've managed to do. Um and yeah, that it will help so many people. So maybe I will kind of it might inspire me to act on some ideas that I have, and not try and not overthink it and just do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Amy, is there anything on the horizon for you, or are you a one and done, like from a from a children's book perspective?
There's nothing on the horizon. No. Yeah, no, I haven't. I really have just, I mean, translations are more what I'm focused on. So I know Dr. Malkin had reached out about, I think it's 7 additional languages, like translating. So that would take a lot of just administrating. But that's exciting to me. Every time there's the prospect of a new translation, it's just opening up a whole other community. So that's really kind of the direction the ongoing work has taken, is the translation. This Hebrew one will happen, hopefully. We'll see what but that kind of funding, I think, is not as daunting. Like, if you need $1,500 and then it's a proper book and it's distributed on Amazon, which everyone can access, then I think I mean, it's beneficial in the LFS community because there are a lot of local chapters of patient advocacy groups. So a lot of times people will just reach out to their local chapter for funding. And like I said, I think it's money well spent for them. It's a project they don't have to undertake themselves, but it's big bang for their buck if it's, $1,500. It was neat. The French translation was not through Quebec, it was through France, and it was funded by the EU. And that was neat to start including the print runs in it because it felt good. Like they printed all their books through Tellwell and they shipped them right to this woman, Gail, who is a researcher. And she doesn't have LFS or LFS family, but she's a researcher in the LFS world. And she saw the need. And it's really neat to be connected with these people that just take that step. It's not something a lot of people, it's just, you think of it, oh, it'd be neat to have that. But the people who just reach out blindly in the dark and say, hey, let's make this happen. And then I work with them pretty closely through the process. I just make it clear at the front, like, I'm going to be emailing you a lot of annoying things just to get prepared for that. And yeah, I've had a really good experience with everybody so far.
Thank you so much for sharing